Hi Siri, I'm looking for a new podcast, one that preferably is hosted by a UF Hall of Famer, one that airs every weekday that would bring me everything I need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions. Siri, is there such a show?
Have you heard of PodUp with Matthews in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any podcast platform?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? UF Hall of Famer Shane Matthews has a show every weekday. I'm gonna go check it out tomorrow. Thanks, Siri. Hi Siri, I'm looking for a new podcast, one that preferably is hosted by a UF Hall of Famer, one that airs every weekday that would bring me everything I need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions. Siri, is there such a show?
Have you heard of PodUp with Matthews in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any podcast platform?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? UF Hall of Famer Shane Matthews has a show every weekday. I'm gonna go check it out tomorrow. Thanks, Siri.
Welcome to PodUp with Matthews in the morning, coming to you from the International Diamond Center Studios, locations across the state of Florida, and right here in Celebration Point, in the heart of Gator Nation. I want to thank Sean Kelly for today's beautiful Wednesday show. It's a cold day in Gainesville. In the first half of the show today, we're going to be joined by JC. You all know him really well. Awesome guy. And then in the second half, we're going to be joined by Neil Blackmon of Saturday Down South to talk a little football, Florida basketball performance last night against Florida State here. JC, how you doing, my man? Good
Hey,
to have
Graham.
you here.
Yeah, brother.
An interesting time in college football. First, I got to ask, man, how was Ohio State? What'd you think of being up there in Columbus? Stay warm?
Yeah, man, it felt like this right now that you're feeling outside here in North Central Florida. It was wonderful. Yeah, I think the folks up there are generally very, very down to earth, good people. I really enjoyed meeting as many people as possible. It was a fun trip. The game was close for the first half. Second half, it kind of got out of control. And I think that Ohio State fans are somewhat. I don't want to say they're bored. Because they truly do expect to win every game. And honestly, when you look at the schedule that they play and the teams that come into the Horseshoe, as they call it, which is a very old stadium, but when they go into that place, they know they're going to win. And so the drama, the excitement of the anticipation of, man, are we going to have to sweat this one out is not there. They're basically waiting for Michigan and then Indiana. And, you know, Graham, it's funny, in the Big Ten, they want to compare themselves as being equals to, say, the SEC. But these games are not as competitive from Ohio State on, when Ohio State plays, whoever it is they're playing, they're such a big favorite that these games almost seem like exercises. And the league has a long way to go to catch up to Ohio State, bro. Just athletically on the field, they have a very, very long way to go. So I don't know when that's going to happen, if the league's going to get better from the top down. But in the middle of that league, I think you have a bunch of teams that are fighting and scrambling. But I think the Big Ten is a conference that we already know who's going to win it. And so basically we just sit around waiting for a championship game. And if I was going to – and I asked Shane this. Of course, he blew it off. But I'm going to ask you this. If you're a team like Ohio State or Indiana, or let's say you're one of the two teams in the SEC that are unbeaten and they play in a championship game, how much does that championship game to you really matter now with the playoffs? The fact that last night's show was centered around playoffs and not conference championships mostly, and the fact that you could lose an integral part of your team that could change the entire complexion of your team in a game that really has no bearing whatsoever on what you play for the entire season. Meaning, last year we saw what happened to Carson Peck. We saw what happened to George in the playoff game. What did they do? They won the SEC that nobody talks about. So what is your thinking about these conference championship games, specifically in the Big Ten and in the SEC? Because if Indiana loses Mendoza or if Ohio State loses Julian Saying, that will absolutely change their team. Same for Texas A&M and their quarterback, Marcel Reed, and Alabama and their quarterback in Ty Simpson. How do you feel about these games?
Well, I want SEC championships and Big Ten championships to matter. Like, I don't want those games to be worthless, because for so long when the BCS and then even in the 4-team college football playoff, they mattered. You know, you had to win that SEC championship or the Big Ten championship to be in the postseason like you wanted. That's not really the case anymore. You take care of business in the regular season. You get to 10-1. it gets 11-1, 10-2 even with some of these teams, you can afford to lose your conference championship game and still be in the postseason. So if you take care of business in the regular season, you don't really have to worry about the conference championship. And there's something depressing to me about that because I want to see teams have to compete at the end of the slate here, and where it really matters who is the healthiest team, who's peaking at the right time. I don't want to see teams throw in the towel here, but the injury aspect does 100% make sense because if you've already secured your spot and you have more to lose than gain from that conference championship, you should be playing to preserve your postseason future. So I totally get that argument. I know that networks don't want coaches coming out saying it because they don't want, everyone tunes into the conference championships, not just fans of that team, because if their team's done playing, they want to see you get to this kind of interesting thing at the end of the year where SEC teams kind of come together and after a brutal slate and Big Ten too, they're kind of rooting for, they don't want to. Michigan fans don't want to root for Ohio State and Florida fans don't want to root for Georgia, but they want the SEC, the Big Ten to be represented on the highest stage so that they can sit back there and look and say, hey, listen, we had to play the national champion. We had to play a team that was in the semifinals. I get that argument as well. And they don't want coaches coming out and saying that, hey, we had to rest a bunch of guys. We didn't need to take it serious at all. That's bad messaging. I don't think that the networks want that, and money talks. TV is running the game here, as everyone knows who can't, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, tune into these games on YouTube TV still. That's where the bottom line comes down to. So Comfort Temp Heating and Air is your number one local HVAC company, offering $1,000 off new installation units and 10% off any additional services through December. Visit us at comforttemp.com. It's cold here in Gainesville, so make sure your heater is working right now. Absolutely. I want to see 6 SEC teams in the college football playoff, and I think we have a really good chance of that happening because
Really?
you're just talking about Ohio State, and Michigan's having a down year, Penn State's having a down year, and I do think that for the
Michigan's got
SEC,
Graham. Hold on a second. Michigan's got one loss. They beat Ohio State
yeah,
at
but
home.
they're not as good as
No, they're not. But what if they
I think
were to
they'll
beat?
make it. Though they have a good chance of making it.
Dude, they beat
But
Ohio State last year. They beat them last year
yeah,
in Columbus. Now, here's the thing: they win that game in Columbus, and it didn't propel them to their conference championship game. But Ohio State lost, didn't even play in the conference championship game, and dominated in the playoffs. What was more important? It was what they did in the playoffs. The conference championship game to me has lost so much importance because of the playoff. And if you lose your quarterback in that game, you will likely lose in the playoffs. That happened. That happened to Georgia. This is all facts. This is not like what do you think is going to happen. The old days are over, and I hate to say this, but that game doesn't matter to me anymore because the bigger prize is the national championship. Now, you probably get through that game without getting hurt, but you're going to bang up your team. Ole Miss is going to be 11-1 and not have to play in a conference championship game and be a 5th or 6th seed and host a playoff game. That's probably going to happen. And then you have Notre Dame. My God, they don't even play in a conference championship game, and they're already in the college football playoffs. That guy was a genius. The Swarbrick guy said, listen, I'll go ahead and say that we can never host a playoff game as long as as long as we have a seat at the table to talk about the college football playoff. Well, now that they've changed the way it's seeded, Notre Dame can still have a top 4 seed and not even play in a conference championship game. What the hell does a conference championship game really mean? That's the whole point I'm trying to make. Is that, yeah, the players can say they won an SEC title one day, and then the next week they got bombed by Notre Dame. So that's what happened to Georgia. And I think Michigan, you say they're not good. I agree. They're not the same team. They have one loss in their conference, and they will host Ohio State in a game where they will have a tiebreaker advantage over Ohio State in their conference if they beat Ohio State.
yeah, I think it's just more kind of I don't want to say indictment, but maybe an indication of the depth of the league there in the Big Ten, because I do think that there's 3, 4, You could maybe even say 5 teams that have a case to be in there, but they're not playing the Miamis, the LSUs, the Texas A&Ms of the world like Florida is. I think this is quite interesting. I don't think I don't think any other team has played more potential college football playoff teams
Yeah,
than
bad.
Florida. You got
Yeah,
Miami,
no, no.
Texas A&M, Georgia, and here's the one I got to get your thoughts on. First, got
Texas.
to shout out get Texas right there. Gallo Car Wash, locally owned by UF alum, and the only car wash that provides NIL opportunities to Gator athletes. Locations on Northwest 13th Street, Wilson Road, and coming soon in Jonesville. The one that is crazy to me,
Yeah,
college football playoff rankings come out last night. Who's sitting there at number 24?
oh,
USF,
yeah,
which makes USF the highest ranked group
that's
of
right.
5 team.
That's
So
right.
you could have a team, and they'll move up in the rankings if they keep taking care of business. But you could have a team that's sitting outside the top 12 that makes the college football playoff. And I don't know. I feel like I get what they're trying to do with the parity and have teams that aren't in the power conferences have a chance to make it. But there's something that just seems weird to me about we're sitting here talking about a team that's barely in the top 25 having
Hmm.
a chance to make. And that's no disservice to USF
Yeah.
because it could be North Texas, it could be whoever it is. But
Hmm.
it just feels weird to me that we're talking about a team being ranked number 24 in the country having a chance to be in the college
Yeah.
football playoff. Do you like that format? I mean, I know a lot of people are in favor of it, and maybe we got the SEC power conference bias being down here in Gainesville, but for me, it seems a little bit weird. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it would be weird if we had 6 SEC teams and taking up half the field, but I'm not against it, Graham. But South Florida as the highest group of 5 team, I don't mind them having a seat at the table. I don't, because sometimes those teams can break through, have an undefeated season. It's a magic year and blah, 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 blah. But Georgia right now would be their host. So if you look at what happened last night, the top 12 teams were listed. The 11th and 12th team are not as important. You really want to just be in the top 10 because you've got Notre Dame, you've got a group of 5 champion, and then the ACC champion. Well, the ACC champion right now is projected to be none other than Miami. And I don't know how Miami is ahead of Georgia Tech, but they are. But USF would be the 12th seed. In that scenario, Miami would play Texas Tech. Georgia is home against USF. Ole Miss would be at home against Oregon. This is from the rankings last night. And then you would have, I'm sorry, Oregon would be at home against Notre Dame. Ole Miss would be at home against Texas, who would be 10. Texas has, to me, a playoff game this weekend at Georgia. There's also a playoff game for Oklahoma this weekend. That game is at Alabama. If Oklahoma beats Alabama, that gets them now into the conversation of the top 10 because they are sitting at 11. So if they beat Alabama and Georgia beats Texas, Oklahoma now is in the top 10. That means they are in the field. So the ACC champion, I don't know if they're any better than the Group of 5 champion, to tell you the truth, Graham. I don't really know. So I would say Miami is a very good team, but I'd say they're disappointing to this point with 2 losses. But they're very athletic. We all know about them. We saw them play Florida. We all thought at one point, and let's be honest, we all thought they were the best team in the country at one point, maybe a month and a half ago. So things change. It's hard to say who's going to be where. There's still a lot of football left to play, Graham. But I'm convinced that Florida's next coach is going to be 11-1 for Ole Miss. And you know, our guy here on this show is 1,000% convinced Lane Kiffin will be Florida's next coach, but he's got a lot of work to do still in Oxford. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the next 60 days, next 30 days for that matter.
Yeah, I really am intrigued to see what happens this weekend. Before we jump into that real quick, I want to briefly, I don't want to traumatize anyone out there, but it's hard to, in my opinion, for a lot of fans out there, and tell me if I'm wrong in the comments here on YouTube Live and Facebook. It's hard to get up for this one after the Kentucky game. I mean, that was, I don't blame anyone for turning it off. That was,
I turned it off.
Growing up in my lifetime, I know you're the same boat. You saw that Kentucky game on the schedule and you're sitting there being like, all right, there's one win. You could say the same about Vanderbilt as well. And now the last 5, 6, 7 years, really, Kentucky has kind of had Florida's number in the series. And I'll give Mark Stoops some credit. Longest tenured coach in the SEC, great defensive coach, experienced, recruits well. He's got kind of an interesting recruiting landscape, which I don't think a lot of Florida fans maybe fully understand how tough it is, because he's got Ohio State in his backyard. He's got Michigan in his backyard up north, and then he's recruiting all down south. And they really had to get to where they are right now, evaluate well, evaluate early, build relationships, have competitive NIL, which they've gotten resources there, even though basketball is the moneymaker. They've had to do a lot of advanced legwork to get to the spot they're at. So I give them some credit, but Florida fans don't want to hear that. I mean, what'd you think of the team last Saturday? Did you think they quit?
Yes. I thought they quit, and I thought basically they played their butts off, especially on the defensive side of the ball throughout the entire season, trying to carry the water for the ridiculous offense. And I think that defensively, it's more attitude than anything else. And I think after all those turnovers, they decided to screw it. Let's just get out of here. Let's get the running clock and let's leave. And if they fall behind by 2 touchdowns to their next coach, according to Shane, then they'll quit again. There's no doubt about it in my mind. They've got 3 wins. They're not playing for any postseason anymore. They're not going to go to the postseason. And mathematically, it's still possible, but it's not going to happen. So, if they're down 2 touchdowns, Graham, what do you expect to happen? I think we're going to see exactly the same type of game. I hate saying it, but I'm tired of trying to carry the water for these guys. Defensively, they have played as hard as I think as you can expect. That Georgia game was a real ball basher. And it was a shame they couldn't pull it out. If they beat Georgia, maybe there's some belief, but I think they did quit, absolutely 1,000%. And I'm not the only guy saying that. I've heard that from just about everybody I've talked to, and that includes a lot of folks sitting on the 6th and 7th floor that pay the money for this crap. So, yeah, I think they quit, and I think they will again if they fall behind to Ole Miss. Absolutely do.
And I hate always saying that a competitor quit, because this is a brutal sport. Guys are putting on their bodies on the line. They're going out there and playing. They're risking injury. They're risking their future, really, because one bad play, not even you don't have to take contact, and you could see the rest of your year, if not your career, be altered. And so I hate saying that they quit. If they're out there,
well, do you think they quit? You were there. You watched. You were there. You saw it.
I don't think that they played with the same level of intensity, and I don't think they ran to the ball as much. And so I'll say that they played with less effort than they had, which I think maybe that's diplomatic. Maybe it's a little diplomatic, but I do think that it's all understandable, right? Like I think there's 2 separate topics of conversation. You can quit and it'd be inexcusable, but you just said it best. I mean, the defense has been keeping Florida in games, and they faced a short field 3 times there. I think 4 times there in the first half. So you can say that they quit, but I don't think anyone who's followed the Florida this season can sit there and say it's not understandable. I mean, the offense has been unable to keep Florida in games. They've been unable to execute. The defense has done everything they can. I give them their kudos. I commend them for fighting through 10 games. So even if they did quote unquote quit, it's not like it's a shocking. I don't see people out here shocked that Florida would have quit in this game. It makes a lot of sense given everything the team has gone through. So whether you use the term quit or, Gate played with less energy or intensity, I don't care. I'm not going to correct anyone. I don't blame them for doing it whatsoever. This has been a dismal season in a lot of ways. And if guys need to protect themselves for the future, whether it's next season in Gainesville, somewhere else, the professional career, who am I to sit here in a computer chair with my laptop judging them for what they know is best for their future, whether it's Tank Hawkins opting out, a guy not running to the ball to make a tackle when Florida's down 31-7. I'm not going to judge them whatsoever. And I know some fans maybe feel a little bit different about playing for the pride and the logo like Billy Gonzalez has talked about. But me personally, I understand where it's coming from. We got to talk about this weekend. Before we do, Miapa Latin Cafe. Miapa Latin Cafe. Order your holiday package today. No one does catering like Miapa Latin Cafe. I love grabbing coffee there. If you're thinking about getting your wedding or whatever event catered, I went to a wedding last year that was catered by Miapa. It was fantastic. Highly recommend it. This weekend's big. You seem convinced that Lane Kiffin, man, is the guy.
Don't. No.
Okay, all right.
Don't
Don't put words in your mouth. Don't put words in your mouth. That's Shane. That's Shane. He's a smarter guy than me. I'll say that. He's been around the game a lot longer. What do you make of Lane Kiffin, man? What do you make of this game?
I would love it if Lane Kiffin was the coach of my football team. I loved it when he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. I loved it when Nick Saban brought him and touched him in his pool of coaching rehabilitation. And he said, "You are healed, Lane." And Lane then became a good offensive coordinator that did really good things, had a couple slip-ups, but had some really good results. I think he would bring instant relevance to any program he's at. We have seen that already happen at Mississippi. And I am not as convinced as Shane, but I am also not going to say he's not coming. I'm just saying that what happens so many times in life is you get your hopes up so high and you set yourself up to walk to the altar and you're ready to slip the ring on. All of a sudden, she ain't showing up. And that's a terrible thing to happen. That is worse than just – so what I'm saying is keep your expectation levels grounded, okay? Let's watch what happens this weekend. Let's see what happens after the Mississippi State game that they have to play in a couple of weeks. And let's see what the school does, the University of Mississippi, in terms of offering him a reason to stay financially or whatever. Now, they have given him some bonuses in his contract because of the number of wins he's had. And I think this weekend he is going to come out and his team is going to have so much purpose because this is the biggest game to Mississippi fans. And I talked to two of them last week. They hate Florida, and they hate it because they think Florida is poaching their guy. Well, guess what? That's called life, and that's called business, and that's called economics and everything else. And the reality is that your guy and you are relevant because of your guy, and you guys hate the fact that he's wanted by someone else. Well, that school that has the best odds of landing him, according to whatever, is coming to town. You don't think they're going to be drunk, crazy, and happy to watch a blowout? That's exactly what they're going to do. I hope the Gators play well. I hope they play inspired. I think these players on the field, if Lane Kiffin is going to be the coach next year, are auditioning. So I think they need to play their fannies off and make this their bowl game. The Gators need to make this their bowl game because it's very likely, according to many, that the guy standing on the opposing sideline is going to be your evaluator, and he's going to want to see something. So that's how I would approach it if I'm a Florida fan. If I'm a Mississippi fan, I'm saying let's blow these bums out. Let's blow them out and send them packing just like the Big Blue did a week ago. That's how I'm looking at this game. It's 16.5 points, Graham. I don't know the last time Florida was a 16.5 point underdog. They weren't a 16.5 point underdog to anybody in the last 2 years. I can't believe the line. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that they got buried at Kentucky last week. And that's why it's that big.
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, if Florida showed fight, beat Kentucky, I think this is still, a 7.5, 9.5 point game coming into it. But, the point about being an audition potentially for Lane Kiffin, that could inspire some people to think that Florida's going to have a better performance. I mean, you're going to get a sideline level view if you're Lane Kiffin, if he is the guy for some guys that you may want to keep in Gainesville, or some guys on the flip side that you're sitting there being like, all right, these guys are not up to the level that I think. And I think it's fascinating in a sense, the college football playoff conversation, because also if you're Florida, you got to be a little conflicted, right? You want to see an inspiring performance from Lane Kiffin. If you want him to be the coach, you don't want him to have a letdown in a game like this, because last year they still were in the college football playoff mix. They suffer the loss to Florida, finish the season 9-3, don't make it. Lane Kiffin has been prone to some disappointments in these decisive games here, some uninspired performances from his teams, and you don't want that to come against the Florida team when you have everything to play for. But at the same time, a win for Florida could result in Ole Miss, if they say they lose the Egg Bowl to a much improved Mississippi State team, but one that they're going to be probably a double-digit favorite against. They could be 9-3 if they lose these next two games and then not be in the college football playoff. And then in theory, that makes Lane Kiffin more attainable. Let me just say this little rant real fast.
Yeah, I see that.
It's not going to be about money for Lane Kiffin. I know you know this. I'm speaking into the abyss here when I say this. A lot of people know this. The Grove Collective has given him a ton of resources. He's got privacy at Oxford. He's got his family there with him, which is priceless. He can do his hot yoga. He can do whatever he wants. It's going to be about whether he thinks he can win at a higher rate at Florida. And he knows Jim McElwain, he knows Dan Mullen, he certainly knows Billy Napier, and he's going to be asking those questions if he's talking with Florida about what will be different for me in Gainesville that didn't work out for those guys. Would I have more resources? Would I have more privacy? Would I not have to do the annual spring speaking tour where I'm selling myself as a salesman and going around the state and talking to boosters and talking to fans? Would I be able to really kind of set my own schedule and have that work-life balance and let me do my thing and not have this oversight here? And really, it leads me to my next question. People have talked about Florida not being the lone suitor for a guy like Lane Kiffin. If there's anything that I think maybe has helped Scott Strickland's image and has helped Florida's program image in separating themselves from a school like LSU, it has been this debacle that we have seen. And I'm not one who's, here to talk about politics, because sports are so often an escape from politics for people right now. And it's a way for everyone to come together. And but with all that said, man, the situation in Baton Rouge with the governor, with what they've talked about with coaching salaries, this Brian Kelly lawsuit, I mean, how much do you think that just makes
Yeah.
Florida look a little bit better? I give Scott Strickland some credit because he came out there and said, we're going to pay them what the market requires.
Yeah.
We're not going to negotiate Billy Napier's buyout. You got Brian Kelly trying to sue to get his full buyout here, and it was
crazy.
a crazy buyout.
Crazy.
But I think that makes Florida look a little bit better right now in a more, desirable place, because you're not going to have just two bosses.
Yeah.
You're not going to have the AD and the governor. You know who your boss is, and you don't have to be looking over your shoulder thinking that the governor is going to maybe kind of cut in here and push his influence in and change some things up. What do you make of the situation in Baton Rouge, man? I mean, how crazy is it?
Yeah, it's chaotic. It's crazy. They're trying to get out of paying him $54 million, which I think is the largest ever, other than Jimbo Fisher.
Jimbo, made that 75.
So I think LSU's trying to say they fired him for cause. That won't win. He didn't violate any morality or any terms of his contract that would have allowed him to be fired for cause. He will win something. They tried to settle up for 20 and 30 million. He said no. He's entitled to 54 million. So he'll win that. Shooter McGavin says, hey, JC, let's say Ole Miss is 10-1 going into the Egg Bowl and sitting number 2 in the SEC. Are you saying they lose the game on purpose? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just basically questioning the validity of what these games really mean in the big picture. That's all I'm saying. You could still have an SEC game that is used as a playing game for some of these teams that are somewhat on the margin. But in terms of an 11-1 team, you don't have to worry about it. You're in the playoff, especially if you play in this league. You do not have to worry about – and I would almost say playing in Atlanta would be counterproductive to keeping the health of your team. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe these kids are ready to go and want to play, and that's fine. You can win an SEC championship, and that's great. But does anybody care about winning the baseball SEC championship? Does anybody care about that? Does winning the NCAA basketball tournament for a team that's not on the bubble really matter? No, it's what's coming up after. And that's the world we have to start focusing on, and that's the world we have to live in now, and that's the way I would like people to think. Because if you sit around thinking about the 90s all day, and you sit around thinking about the 2000s, it's the same problem Alabama fans had when Bear Bryant died. They couldn't get over it. And for 20 years, they were awful. And really, it wasn't 20 years. It was about 10 because they won it all in 92. But my goodness, let's move on and let's get with what's going on in today's world. I think Scott Strickland is basically a fundraiser and a campaign manager. That's what he is. I think he's going to do what the boosters basically tell him to do. And I think he sees 2030 as being his way out. And that'll be it for him. And so I think he's going to try to go out with a bang. They're going to throw as much money as possible at Kiffin. But like you said, it doesn't matter. And reality is going to be whether or not Lane wants to come to Gainesville. That's it. That's the end of story, because nobody knows anything unless Lane tells you that, Jimmy Sexton tells you that, or Scott Strickland tells you what's happening. Nobody knows anything. I want to hear from a booster that says they know. They don't. They don't know unless they've heard from Lane, unless they've heard from Jimmy Sexton, or unless they've heard from Scott Strickland specifically say when and yes, he is coming to Gainesville. So keep yourself grounded, folks, and just hope the Gators put on a good show on Saturday in Mississippi. And if they don't, there's a lot of good football on the rest of the channels.
Amen, man. Hey, I appreciate you joining me today here from the coming from the International Diamond Center Studios, locations across the state of Florida and right here in Celebration Point in the heart of Gator Nation. Going to be an interesting week this week, JC. I'm looking forward to getting up to Oxford for the first time,
Have a great time. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I got to knock this one off my bucket list. I got this one. I got Auburn. Georgia,
Oh
and
man,
Oklahoma that I still got to
yeah,
hit in the SEC, and then I've hit them all. So trying to get to all 16 here. So
very
looking
very
forward to
good.
getting up there. Got to fly into Memphis, rent a car.
Oh
Looking forward
yeah,
to it
you're
as
gonna
well.
love it, Graham. The whole experience is going to be fantastic, and the great thing is that you have the entire day before kickoff to just take it all in. You don't have to rush to the stadium at 11:30 in the morning. It's so great. You're going to get the full experience. It's going to be a late night, but you're a young guy and you can handle it. So just go have a good time and don't leave anything in the bag, brother. Play it out.
Work-life balance, right? I got to make
That's
sure
right.
I take advantage of being up there. All right,
You
JC,
got
we're
it.
going to get you out of here, man. We
All right,
appreciate you
man.
having us. We're going to take this first break here on PodUp with Shane Matthews in the morning. Again, coming from the International Diamond Center studios. And when we come back after this quick break, we're going to have Neil Blackmon to talk a little Florida basketball, break down what he thinks about the state of the Lane Kiffin Florida saga right here on PodUp with Matthews in the morning. We'll be right after this quick break.
Our premium sponsors are Atlantic Roofing, Campus USA Credit Union, International Diamond Center, JF Hayden's Craft Liqueurs, Los Landeros Tequila, Meldon Law, Titan MRI and Imaging, UF Health Orthopedics. Our gridiron sponsors are Baker's Sports, Comfort Temp, Electronics World, Florida Cracker Kitchen, Florida Victorious, Gallo Car Wash, Miapa Latin Cafe, Peachland Dental, Quality Plumbing, Rue's Ogre State Farm, Silverback Concrete, 84 Lumber, Big Mills Cheesesteaks, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Gator Dominoes, Ironwood Golf Course, McDonald's of Gainesville, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, UF Bookstores, Advocare, and MG&A Wealth. Watch and listen to us live on Facebook and YouTube. Listen to the podcast whenever on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And if you want to advertise, give my man Freddie a call at 352-284-3733.
Naysayers. Setbacks. Injuries. Life throws a lot of hurdles your way. The key is just keep jumping them.
Coach, you know what always impressed me? How you beat Florida State to win the 1996 national championship.
And I was really impressed with your 06, 08, and 09 Gator teams.
And the way you coached Danny to the Heisman Trophy.
A lot like what you did with Tim Tebow.
You know, you won more SEC championships than you lost home games at the Swamp.
And you had plenty of super games in front of our Gator Nation.
Yeah, there really is something special about the Swamp.
I guess that's why we say about the Swamp, only the Gators get out alive.
To the Swamp and the Gators, with the best beverage served at Spur's Gridiron Grill, 100% agave Los Landeros tequila, aged in bourbon barrels for a smoother taste.
I think you mean head beer coach, 1966 lager, a crisp, light, bodied lager for easy drinking.
Nope. Los Landeros tequila, smooth enough to drink neat and bold enough to elevate a cocktail.
1966 lager, enjoyed on game days in the fall or whenever you need a winning cold brew.
Los Landeros tequila.
1966 lager.
Los Landeros.
1966 lager.
Y'all stop bickering.
Okay, you're both wrong anyway. The best thing Spurrier's Gridiron Grill offers are Jerry's famous chocolate chip cookies.
Welcome back to PodUp with Matthews in the morning, coming to you from the International Diamond Center studios with locations across the state of Florida and right here in Celebration Point in the heart of Gator Nation. We're going to be joined here by someone you all know really well, does a fantastic job with Saturday Down South, runs the Florida Basketball Hour podcast with Eric Fawcett. And we're going to talk a little bit basketball as well as some more Lane Kiffin, some more Florida football here. First, again, I want to shout out Comfort Temp Heating and Air, your local #1 HVAC company offering $1,000 off new installation units and 10% off any additional services through December. Visit us at comforttemp.com. We're going to bring in Neil now. Neil does, again, a fantastic job talking all things Florida basketball, doing film breakdowns. Neil, how you doing, my man? Good to have you here today.
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You do a fantastic job writing about Florida football and obviously Florida basketball on a consistent basis. You and I were blessed to cover a national championship last year, which was a bucket list item for me. I remember watching the 06 and '07 teams when I was, in middle school here, first year of high school as well. And I never knew if I'd have a chance to cover one. I was out there for baseball, but basketball and football are just a little bit of a different breed in my mind here. And this team is going to get every team's best shot, as we saw against Arizona 9 days ago, and as we saw last night against FSU. Neil, let's jump in here, man, and talk about what you thought about Florida's performance against FSU, what you thought the Noles did well, how they gave Florida a little bit of fits there, and how Florida kind of was able to close it out, even though those final 4 minutes were not, I think, what Todd Golden was really looking for from his team down the stretch, just knowing that they had a chance to put that game away. They were up 71-64, had a chance to close it out, make some long range shots, had a few too many turnovers, couldn't get some stops when they needed it as well. But that's a good FSU team, man. What'd you think of how last night went down in the O-Dome?
Yeah, I was really impressed by FSU. They did play Alabama in a scrimmage, I guess an exhibition because it was open to the public. So there's the scrimmage exhibition, whatever the distinction. But they went to overtime with an Alabama team that just won at St. John's last week, and lost 109-105 in that game. And the biggest thing was they could really shoot. And Nate Oates, Alabama's coach, was really effusive in praising Florida State's, style of offense, how they space the floor, how they get up and down. They were comfortable with high possession basketball. The thing that I actually was more impressed with was just the way that they changed defenses a lot. And, they'll do some two-thirds, three-quarter pressure to the way that they, blitz ball screens, to extending their ball pressure, to the traps that made it harder for Florida's smaller guards against Florida State's size and length. Like, I thought all of that stuff was a lot for a team to handle in its third game, and the Gators made their way through it, which is great. But I also think, yeah, I mean, to your point, anytime you have 18 turnovers, and 6 of them are from your preseason All-American, that's a little bit concerning. So, I think there's some kind of a give and take. You have to recognize that Florida State probably isn't a team that is a bottom of the ACC team like they are projected to be. They look much more like an NCAA tournament bubble team, maybe even beyond that to me, kind of a top 40-ish type group. And so Florida could end up getting a win that's in a higher quadrant, quad 2, I think is certainly possible there. But Florida also made some mistakes, shot 6 of 31 from 3. I know everybody's beating the shooting to death right now. They're not making shots. And so if you shoot 6 of 31 from 3 and turn it over 18 times and still beat a good team, like, I think there's a reason that Todd Golden was so happy after that game, Graham.
Yeah, the analytics would have easily looked at the box score and said we could have lost that game. Just having a drop off in performance from Alex Condon, which you're going to get some nights where he goes for 25 and 10. You're going to get some nights where he goes for 13 and 8 and has 5 or 6 turnovers. I mean, they play through him at such a high rate that he's going to make some decisions that are not wise. He's still a young player. He's still so new to the game in itself that he's going to make some mistakes, and you're going to have to just kind of take the good with the bad, I think, as he continues to develop. And they doubled him on, really early on, trying to force him into some of those mistakes. And there were some times where he made a wise decision out of it, found a guy in the corner, was able to, pivot through it and find someone for an easy cut. And there were times where he drove to the rim and then threw a bad pass, an unwise decision. And so you're going to take the good with the bad. You're going to praise him one night and you're going to rip him the other. That's just how things go. We got a couple questions here on YouTube Live, sponsored by Quality Plumbing. This YouTube Live question is brought to you by Quality Plumbing and residential and commercial plumbing services and emergency repair since 1984. Our name says it all. Cal Johnson, 630, wants to know, Neil, with our shooting woes, The staff, will they get Lloyd ramped up sooner to hopefully start by conference play? The three big lineup is a logjam. Alex Lloyd is going to have a great career. I'm going to have you answer this, but his first game, you're talking about shooting woes. He went 1 of 5 from the field, hit a 3-pointer, and he went 1 of 4 from free throw line. I see people harp on the free throw shooting all the time, and understandably so, because it can be consequential. But Alex is going to need some more time, in my opinion. It's not going to be instant offense. You're talking about a national championship winning coaching staff. They know what they're doing. And if they don't think that Lloyd is ready to play right now, quality minutes against these Power 5 opponents, there's a reason that he's not out there. But I got to get your take. Do you think that they're going to start ramping him up more and more as time goes on so that you could have him as an option off the bench by the time league play gets here in January?
Yeah, I mean, look, Florida doesn't have a lot of bye games, so it's hard to ramp a player up without live game reps. And to your point, Graham, like I think if they felt, especially defensively, like if they felt he was ready to contribute on both ends of the floor, he would play more than he's played early. And it just hasn't worked out that way yet. I do think he adds. I think he'd be a shooter that they need to some extent, though. Again, like Boogie Fland is not going to shoot 16% from 3 on the season. Urban Klabsar hit a huge shot last night, which I think hopefully will get him going. You could sense in the arena. In fact, maybe some people didn't even see, but you could sense in the arena this relief from Klabsar. Like it was just visible on his face to make that shot. And then after he hit it, I forget who called timeout, but he came over to the bench and Golden was really fired up. Maybe I think they feel like they can get Urban going and he'll start knocking down shots, which he did in Florida's scrimmages. I mean, Florida shot the ball really well against Illinois. So it's in this team's capability to do that. I think with Alex, I think he's going to be an all-SEC, all-American caliber player in Florida. I really do. I think the physicality adjustment for him defensively is quite a bit of a leap. And I think he'd be playing more in these, he hasn't played any in the non-bye games. So, do I think if he plays well against Merrimack in a week and a half, that maybe he'll get some run out in San Diego? Yeah. And then if he shows something in those games, great. But, to think he's going to be a guy who helps solve Florida's shooting woes Sunday when they play Miami, no, I wouldn't anticipate that.
Yeah, I think that the Miami game is going to be really interesting because I think Miami, like Florida State, is a bit better than maybe Florida fans are used to. You saw their record last season, but in this transfer portal era, you can change your team overnight almost. And Jai Lucas has done a really good job building that roster. One of Lloyd's former teammates, Dante Allen, is a freshman there. They've got a bunch of, Trey is looking really good for them as well. I think that they're going to be better than people think. They played Bethune-Cookman so well, a Bethune-Cookman team that took Auburn to overtime.
Yep.
And, like you said, Florida doesn't have a lot of bye games here. So Lloyd's going to get his opportunities whenever he has a chance. I think he'll see the floor against Merrimack. He should play in that late December stretch against Colgate, St. Francis. I think Dartmouth as well. Is in there, right? Some tune-up games, a nice little Christmas present for Florida right before they open SEC play here against, I believe, Missouri. So, but we got to talk about the shooting woes here real quick. Before we do, I want to make sure that we shout out Silverback Concrete. Silverback Concrete builds firm foundations for generations. You stand on it, we stand by it. The shooting woes are going to be something that people talk about a ton. And I've told people on our message board at Swamp 247, I wrote about it in my takeaways, really the last 3 games, that Florida is going to get things figured out. Last year, they started, I think they hit 5 of 29 3-pointers against USF. They beat Jacksonville 81-60 in their second game last year. And I think they went 7 of 32 or something like that, And then, anyone who was thinking the sky was falling after those 2 games last year probably felt a little bit foolish when Florida was cutting down the nets in San Antonio, just knowing that, hey, it's way too early to panic. But I think the one that people are harping on the most is Xavier Lee. Now, you and I, we've talked about it. We've done several episodes about this. We're both really high on Xavier Lee. And I talked to Todd after the game, and it was like, I had to ask him. I was like, do you think that it's a question of the looks that he's getting, or are shots just not falling for him? Because it's always a delicate balance for wanting to give a guy a green light like Xavier has, and making sure that he's not going to lose his confidence as a shooter, which he's a veteran guy. I don't think he's gonna keep letting that thing fly, man. Shooters shoot. But for him, that's been a notable, I think, I don't want to even call it an issue, but it's been a low point so far through, again, just 3 games. We're talking 10% of the regular season. I mean, when you look at Xavier Lee, do you agree that he's getting quality shots and they're just not falling? I think that, and I want to get your take on this, and maybe this is off base here. I know they shot the ball well against Illinois. I know they shot the ball well against FIU, but those were in front of empty gyms. And Xavier played a couple games last year against power conference teams, but playing in front of 12,000 screaming fans, playing on the road in Las Vegas in front of a hostile crowd is different than playing at Princeton. And
Yep.
I do think that this is a thing where you're talking about a guy still acclimating to this environment and finding his feet. And what do you make of it, Xavier Lee's start? I mean, I know you're not concerned, just like I'm not. But fans out there are already questioning whether Lee is going to be able to cut it in the SEC when we get here in 6 weeks. I mean, do you have those concerns? And maybe talk to a few people off the edge if you don't.
Yeah, here's a fun one. So Walter Clayton Jr. came from the Metro Atlantic, so like not even a league that's as good as the Ivy League. And it just so people know, his first 3 games at Florida, he was 3 of 13 from 3-point range, and that included a a game where he was 1 of 5 against Jacksonville. So it isn't like there weren't. And a game where he was 1 of 6 and had a crucial late turnover in a loss to Virginia in Charlotte, and that was not a very good Virginia team. I think they made the NCAA tournament, but they weren't very good. And so, I do think that there is an adjustment period. I would say that the one thing that concerns me like a little bit about Xavier, because Florida did shoot the ball poorly out of the gate last year, but because they had Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richard and Elijah Martin, 3 guys who were proven shooters, you kind of knew that it would fix itself. Well, Florida's proven shooters really are Xavier Lee and Xavier Lee. And so, and I say that with all like Boogie Flan shot 40% in New York City high school basketball from 3. Like, he's a fantastic shooter. He just is also 19 years old and hasn't played a ton of college basketball, right? So Xavier is a guy that interests me because, he is, like Todd said, a 36, 37% career 3-point shooter. So for him to start this way with a lot of good looks is pretty concerning. The one thing that I would like to see more from Xavier, right, is, he is shooting 4 of 22 on catch and shoots right now. And so, like, when I look at how I think he's going to need to make some shots in this offense, that's got to improve. Now, do I think that he's going to shoot 18% on catch and shoots moving forward? No. But, like, he really needs to hit 35% of those for Florida to have the type of season they want to have. Because Xavier has always been a shooter who's a little bit better when he creates his own kind of momentum off the bounce. And Graham knows this. Like, there aren't a ton of shooters in the sport of basketball, period, that are better off the bounce than off the catch. And the best shooters can do both. Like, Xavier's got to show that he can adjust in this offense to the occasional, hey, you're wide open in the corner off the catch. And so when he misses those, that's a little concerning. I'm not concerned with the form. I know people have talked about the low shot. Like, he's always done that. He compensates for it because his release is so fast. but I am concerned that there's been a lot of open looks for Xavier and they haven't got in. So you just wonder how long it will take for his confidence to kind of either get it back or will his confidence wane. We'll see. Miami's a team that guards really well. But to your point, Graham, even with the game in a neutral venue in Jacksonville, that's not necessarily a small venue, Veterans Memorial. They played NCAA tournament games there. But, I do think it'll be a little quieter than the places he's been so far. And that'll be interesting. Maybe he'll shoot better in a less packed venue. And then he'll be like, oh, okay. There's something to this. He was pretty comfortable in the gyms he was playing in Princeton type thing.
Yeah, I think that Florida is going to be just fine. They could shoot the lights out on Sunday against Miami. They should have a sizable Florida crowd there as well, just given the proximity. And fortunately for Florida, they still have Thomas Houck, which I correct me if I'm wrong. I got to shout you out. You said before the season that you thought Thomas Houck would be Florida's best player, and I think that early on that's paying dividends, right? It looks to be a pretty smart take by you.
Yeah, I did. I thought he would be. I almost voted for him for preseason SEC Player of the Year, and then I thought maybe that Garth Listman and the SEC would never give me a ballot again because they just assumed that I went out on a homer limb. But it turns out the guy that I picked, Otega Owe, is not even the best player on his team, Denzel Aberdeen. We'll see. But Tommy looks like a National Player of the Year candidate through 3 games. He really does. He's a mismatch nightmare. Offensively, no one smaller has a prayer guarding him. And then the bigger players keep sending him to the free throw line. I know he missed 2 free throws at the end of the game last night, but his free throw shooting has been excellent. And then last night, what really impressed me, Graham, was his defense, right? I thought him and Boogie were kind of the difference makers. And Condon, I don't think gets enough credit for his rim defense in the second half. But I thought Tommy's ability to kind of contain McCray for a while was super huge. It's so weird because Robert McCray had 29 points, and I thought Florida did a really good job on him for at least 30 minutes of that game. He just kind of got a bunch of points late when Florida was kind of in control. And so it seemed like Florida didn't, but Tommy Houck had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, he did. He was incredible in all 3 phases of the game. I mean, he was able to score at will. He blocked shots, affected shots, got out in transition. His ball handling has been so much better. And it's been awesome to see here because, I think everything we just talked about football players quitting and playing for the logo and stuff like that. Tommy grew up a Florida fan, and nothing means more to him than playing for, the Gators here. And so
that's right.
It was really impressive for him. And I joked with him after the game that he now is the responsibility of carrying the rivalry sword against Florida State and against Miami on Sunday, now that Walter Clayton isn't in Gainesville to hate the Noles. So, Neil, we really appreciate you joining us here on this episode of PodUp with Matthews in the Morning. Tell people where they can follow you, what you got coming up here. It's an exciting week. It's an exciting season for Florida basketball. You also do great football coverage of Saturday Down South. Tell people where they can read and listen to you.
Yeah, thank you. My writings at Saturday Down South, SEC football, and then Florida football, and then SEC basketball. I'm the lead basketball writer over there. And then, for basketball coverage, check out our podcast, Florida Basketball Hour. Me, Eric Fawcett, Graham's on there pretty frequently at this point. And then our patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. So appreciate all y'all. Thanks for having me, Graham.
Hey, it's my pleasure. We really appreciate you joining the show today. Shane's going to be back very soon. He couldn't be here today, but you know him. He's a workhorse. He's got something going on. He will be back here tomorrow before he heads to Oxford for this exciting football game between Florida and Ole Miss, even though most of the conversations surrounding this game are not about the game itself. They're about Lane Kiffin. They're about whether Florida can show up and compete in this game after it looked like Florida, quote unquote, quit. So I'm fascinated to see how it goes down. You can read my stuff over at Swamp 247. We'll have podcasts, predictions, you name it, breakdowns of the opponent coming over there at Swamp 247. But again, that's going to do it for this episode of Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning. Again, sponsored by the International Diamond Center Studios right here in Celebration Point, with locations all around the state of Florida. We're going to wrap this episode up. I really appreciate everyone tuning in on YouTube, on Facebook Live. And I'm going to get out of here, maybe keep my heater on, thanks to Comfort Temp. And we'll see y'all next time on this episode on Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning. Y'all take care.